Good morning. I'm Lily with Lily Williams Photography, and this sweet little face is Mary Elizabeth. I'm so glad you are joining us for our first installment of tools here in Photoshop. We'll be going over levels today. Later, you'll see me edit this image pretty closely to the one that I posted in Facebook, and most of that image is using levels. So let's jump right in. There are a couple of different ways you can access your levels panel, but first I want to just give you a quick rundown of why I personally love levels. The great thing about Photoshop is there are 3 or 4, sometimes 10 different ways to do the same effect. Levels gives you a little bit more control. It's user friendly, and it's my favorite beginner tool in Photoshop because you can do just about anything with levels. So you can find levels here in your adjustment tab. You can open that adjustments tab right here under your window. You can click it off, click it on. You can come to layer, new adjustment layer, and come to levels. You can also duplicate your black background doing Control J or Command J once you've clicked on it. Again, Control or Command J. You can come to Image, Adjustments, and Levels here. So, Control L also gives you levels. So, let's open up our levels layer. This opens you up a layer in your layer menu, and kind of just give you the basic rundown of your levels. So here is your histogram. This is what your histogram shows from your camera. Now this changes with each adjustment you do in Photoshop, Lightroom, anywhere that you're editing. So when you manipulate the photo, you're changing your histogram here. So as it's pretty self-explanatory here, you've got your darks, your shadows, you've got your lights, and your midtones. So clicking and dragging any of these changes the look and feel of your image. Now, this 0 here all the way to 255 represents the level of tone in a standard JPEG 8-bit image. So RAW gives you a little bit more room to play. It doesn't destruct your image, but this goes basic from all your 8-bit images. I'm sorry, 8-bit. So here is where it gets fun in levels. You can do what I typically do when I open up an image is I like to correct my levels. So what I like to do is I like to make sure that my blacks are right up against that line. I like to make sure my whites are again right up against the line of that histogram. And then I may play with my midtones a little bit to get the depth or whatever I am personally looking for in that image before we start. So that looks pretty good to me. So I have just fixed my histogram. Now you see what it does is it allows you to have that rich creaminess to where you're just not having such a flat image. Now, the next thing that you can do with levels is you can adjust colors using levels. So here you have your RGB, which is all 3 colors. You have your red channel, your blue channel, and your green channel. So let's click on red. Now, again, you can see that my histogram isn't really where I prefer it. But that's a little red for me, sliding those highlights over. So you can really just figure out what you like. Now the greatest thing about this, let's go back here, is if you know your color wheel, you know that cyan and red are opposites. So when you click the blacks and you slide to the right, you're adding cyan. When you click your highlights and you slide to the left, you're adding red. Now, why is this important? Because this is how you can color correct things very simply, very quickly in your image. Again, magenta and green are opposites. So you click those those shadows, and drag to the right, you're adding magenta. When you click the highlights and you drag in, you're adding green. Okay, now blue and yellow are opposites, so the same applies. See? So this comes in handy as long as you know which are opposites. You can create effects within your image easily to correct almost any issue. Now again, you have your levels here. Say we have come back up, we've added some contrast. Let's bring up the midtones a little bit. And you know what, let's bring those blacks up a little bit. I don't want it too dark. Now, let's do this again. For example's sake, let's bring it up pretty heavy. Oh, you know what? That is just really too dark. You've got your layer mask here. You can take your black brush and you can take that off your subject. Control Z to undo that. You can change your opacity of that levels layer to where you would like it to be. Or you can Control I to invert it and then just apply it where you want it using a white brush. So the possibilities, like I said, really are endless here with levels. Now let's come back up here. Let's reset this so I can show you again. Here you have your output levels. Now what this does is it helps you fade the shadows or dull the highlights. So let's see here. Let's give you a pretty drastic example here so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, see how I've blown out my blacks here. Now, by adding, let's say, 20% in my levels, that means that it's only going to be allowed to affect it to here. No matter what I've done, it's really taking that down. Let's go up again. See? It's almost mattifying that image. Now that's, again, a drastic thing. So what I typically like to do is I like to go and say with 10. And you've just softened it. See, and pull those highlights in a little bit if you want, so they're not as bright. There you go. So, why do I do that? Because it allows you to really have a significant control of that adjustment layer. Oh, hold on. Let's go back here. Okay. So, now another thing that you can do is you can click Alt and drag, and you can see the areas in which you are blowing out. Click Alt and drag here. See? I'm blowing out all those areas. So you can continue to check your histogram to make sure you're not losing. That is the great thing about using that Alt, click, and slide method. So there we go, back at 0. So you can also adjust your white balance using levels. I use the center one here, which is your gray. You click on it, and you come over here, and I try to pick the widest portion. Sometimes it doesn't always work. Like this is too green for me. But then you could come back down, or blue, I'm sorry, to your blue, and you could add some yellow in there if you wanted. Okay, so let's try this again. Let's come back here. This looks pretty white. Again, see how that, it's still pretty blue. The Photoshop is telling me based on this that this is what it should look like. Now, I don't like that, but come back in, soften it up. Let's go in our blue channel and add about 8. And that gives you a really cool creamy image. So you can really transform your images that way. So let's do this again one more time. Levels. Got your blacks, your midtones, your whites. Your output levels allow you to customize the adjustments you've done here, or simply affect something overall, because again, you are using the levels of tone within an image. So we're taking out 15 from our 255, which, as you can just watch, really lifts those blacks, gives it a even tone there. So I'm going to show you how I edit this image using a lot of small levels layers later on this afternoon. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you have any questions, drop them down below in the comments and I will answer them for you. Hope you have a great day.